Okay, thanks everyone for joining my talk today. So yeah, this is on responsibility in design, loosely based around designing our products, but also very much about communication and general approach to being inclusive on a customer level within the business. Obviously, that's a very important topic, one we take very seriously, but there is certainly one that there are a lot of areas that we could be doing a lot more on to be inclusive. For certain people, and we're going to go through the needs of those people, the benefits that we can provide to them and that they can provide to us throughout this talk. And hopefully we're just going to get a bit of an overview as to some of the moving parts, some of the things I've experienced in the past when addressing web projects, web content projects, app projects, anything around providing a service to someone that may have particular needs. So first of all, let's just step back a little bit and think about just on a sort of design level, and I don't just mean an actual designer, but anyone thinking about creating a product. What are some of the things that are within our power to address? One of them is influencing business decisions. So on a very top level, we can use design thinking, which naturally includes rounds of iteration and research where we do speak to people to try and understand the problem better. And so from a very early stage, we can be highlighting areas on a business level that can help with accessibility of our offering. Obviously, when we're talking about those sorts of decisions, product decisions on a very high level, we talk about things like the financial products we offer, the plans we offer. So obviously that has huge repercussions across the entire company and across all of our customers. More specifically, things around materials. So anyone that's into one of my talks before knows that my sort of design guru is Dieter Rams, and Dieter's 9th commandment for design is that design should be environmentally friendly. And it's worth remembering that we can have a huge impact as designers through the things that we create. We create physical products at PensionBee, even occasionally, like a stand we did recently, where we chose to put a QR code on there rather than print out lots of paper brochures. So we had an impact through a design decision there on the material world. More specifically for us, obviously, is energy. We might think that is quite small fry for us. When you scale up to something like Google, actually it becomes a very, very serious consideration. And accessibility is the one that we're going to spend a bit of time now talking about. So what does accessibility mean, and who is it for? So there are some broad categories here, and it's important to remember that many people don't just fit squarely into one category. They fit into a number of categories, or perhaps barely in one. Impaired vision, hearing and speech. Now, these are very, very key issues when we're talking about our own customers. Customers that experience anything in this arena are going to have some quite particular needs that we should be catering for. And the same can be said for physical and motor issues, albeit to a lesser degree. We're going to go through some more detail on about what these things are and how we can help our customers if they do relate to one of these points. Neurodiversity is a very, very interesting one when we're talking about our products, our communication with customers, generally any interaction with our customers that we have at any point. And disability, we'll cover that in a bit more detail. The one I want to focus on just here shortly is general comfort. And this is a very important one when it comes to accessibility as well. I'm 40 years old. I've got a very minor prescription in one eye, hence wearing my glasses today, which is mainly just so I look a bit more intelligent. But it does help me a little bit, mainly with eye strain rather than seeing. And I wouldn't say that I'm visually impaired, but I do definitely think there are certain things I appreciate about web products or products in general that make things like eye strain a bit easier, and we'll talk about that a bit more as well. It's worth likening it to the way you've set up your office, your home office where you're sitting now. You arrange your chair, you know, you get your head height correct, your keyboard in a comfortable place. An extension of that is to do it in the software you're using. So perhaps you'll zoom in a bit on the spreadsheet you're working on. That's the same as adjusting your chair, right? It's making it more comfortable for you. And if that spreadsheet, if that word processor, whatever it is, didn't react in a nice, easy way for you to do that, that would make your life a bit harder. And that's the kind of decisions that we can make, micro decisions that we can make all the time within design and product. So why is this important? Yes, it's inclusivity, right? And it also makes business sense. A lot of people, and we'll look at a few numbers later, a lot of people identify with one or more of these areas and find them important. And we want to be inclusive for those people, and we want to make their lives possible on one end of the spectrum and just a little bit better on the other end. I like this quote: accessibility is a human right. That's from Sarah, who's the Apple Director of Accessibility. Apple are fantastic at taking accessibility very seriously. Everyone else kind of plays catch up to them. And we'll look at some of the stuff that they are doing in that arena in this talk. But I think it's really important to remember, like, accessibility isn't really, as I see it, a choice or something that we should decide whether we include in our products. It is an absolute human right. It's easy when designing products to look at edge cases, for instance, perhaps people that don't necessarily fit into our core, the core market that we're looking after. I think a big difference to a way to differentiate that is people that are that by choice, like perhaps people that want more out of a pension fund in terms of diversified funds. That's a choice they've made. The sort of accessibility requirements we're talking about today aren't people's choices necessarily, and they should be catered for. So let's just talk a little bit more about the product area of this. So how do we cater for this kind of thing within product? So on our end, our app and our web app, there's lots we can do within intrinsic into the design and the build of those products that help with accessibility, and also any point with customer communication which happens via those products. It's also important to consider the broader ecosystems those things sit in. Like if you're viewing our website for a browser, that browser gives a browsing experience to someone that might have a particular need for all their websites. So they may have things set up on a browser level so they can comfortably view the web across the board. So our job then becomes making it possible for that browser to do the job it's intended to do, and not to try and do the job instead of the browser, because that's, you know, people. If your website is easy to read and is accessible, really most of the people that will want some very specific help with accessibility will have a particular thing that would, you know, whether it's color blindness, whatever it is that affects their browsing experience across the board, and they'll have that set up already. And then above that is the operating system and the device controls, and it's fantastic how much great stuff is being done on that level now, because really we're talking about people's entire online experience. It's not just about web pages, then it's about the apps you use, it's about the programs you use, and actually you want a device operating system environment that caters for you across the board. And we fit, how we fit into that is that we become part of that broader ecosystem, and we work with that technology to ensure that we're doing our part. Okay, so just briefly on vision impairment. Vision impairment is a huge one because it affects many people. Arguably, to some degree, it affects everyone. And obviously, the web is a very visual medium. So it's very important for our customers to be thinking about them if they have any sort of visual impairment. And just, yeah, be mindful of how many of us are probably wearing glasses right now that fall into this category. So a few stats here. In the UK, almost 2 million people living with sight loss, 360,000 registered blind or partially sighted. That's a big number. 59% of people in the UK wear glasses, so have some level of, are somewhere on that scale of visual impairment. And there are lots of age-related issues that you get. So the chances of having visual impairment increases as you get older, and there are lots of other disorders that come along with that. So a few things just to look at here. So on the left-hand side, these little images, I don't know how well you can see them, but we've got some accessibility shortcuts that help with vision here. Now, these are OS level, so they affect your entire experience in your operating system, not just a browser level or a website level. And we can see here, we've got a lot of options: voiceover, zoom in, inverting colors, color filters, and the ability to increase contrast and reduce transparency. So in the past, I've been working with accessibility in web design for many years, working on higher education, charities, government sites, all of which have quite strict requirements for accessibility. And it used to very much fall on the product designers to address these things. You used to have high contrast versions. You click a button and it just make the style sheet into a high contrast version. It was all a bit slapdash. It was all a bit different. It was different. Even down to the place where you found how to do this was different on every website. Of course, it's much better that we're now having this ability on the operating system environment. But of course, more towards the comfort end of the scale, it really does fall to designers to ensure that they provided a great basis for these things to work. So here we have an example of the PensionBee homepage, of course, and 100% zoom, and Command plus or Control plus, I've zoomed into 150%. So things like making sure this doesn't break the website are very important. It is kind of part of our QA process, but not anywhere near as rigorously as it should be. I myself, with my very minor prescription, I zoom into 110% quite regularly when I'm reading on my big screen, which is a little bit further away, because I find it more comfortable for long periods of text. Up here on the top right is quite an interesting one. So I've done courses in the past in this kind of thing, and you try on the different glasses and you really get to experience what it's like to have certain eye conditions, like cataracts, for instance, or glaucoma. It can be really disorientating. You put on these glasses and the center of the vision is blacked out, so you only see the peripheral. It really gives you a whole nother perspective on visual impairment and some of these more niche specific issues people have. And it's really great because it's your vision. It's so core to your understanding of the world. It's so great to put yourself into these places a little bit, seeing the blurriness involved in cataracts, and it really just makes you think, wow, this is a very real problem, but it's actually there's so much we can do to help with this. But yeah, so what I note down here is just what is comfortable. A lot of the work we do is just to make the experience comfortable for people, rather than something that's extreme or as a visual sort of disability or blindness on that level. We are going to, but that's obviously sight. So let's skip to the next. Oh no, what I was going to say is we're going to talk about speech and hearing, but it's not yet. Color blindness. 8% of all men and about 0.5% of all women suffer from color blindness. So that's, that is a big number. And you can see here, there are different ways to break this number down. Like, actually, it affects people that associate as being Caucasian much higher than many other ethnicities. So here we're talking about the relationship between colors and being able to distinguish between colors. And that can be quite important in the design of our products or our marketing, our billboards, our emails. We need to make sure people are able to view this stuff comfortably and understand it. Red-green, for instance, red-green color blindness is extremely prevalent, especially amongst men. If you are watching this presentation now and you can't read the number in the circle on the top left, then I'm afraid to say you may well be red-green colorblind, which is, yeah, it's don't be too alarmed. It's very uncommon. sorry, it's very common. And if you see down here along the bottom, you can see variations on our balance screen in the app. So this is to illustrate some of the tools that we have available to us these days to help us understand colour blindness and design for it. So I created the screen on the left here, which is the balance screen, and I used a plugin in our design software called Figma to automatically provide a visual reproduction of what people would see with certain colour blindness. So you can see over here on the left-hand side, we've got I've got so many different names that I can't even read, but have very specific different sort of colour blindness combinations. So you can see here that the greys and the yellows, they change depending on the different type of condition you have. So it's great to be able to see, okay, is this accessible? This screen is very much just about content on a white background, so there's not too much that can go wrong. But some screens that have a lot of imagery or color on them, it can be really important to check those for color blindness issues. And a note on contrast and saturation, and this could be in marketing emails. For instance, we had, I don't know if you remember, a while back, we'd accidentally used a wrong color in an email. It's quite a light gray. And we had a lot of people contacting us saying, guys, can you sort this out? I can't really read this comfortably. So that was, that was something that sort of slipped through as an accident. But this sort of thing should be taken very seriously, and it should be factored in. And we do factor it in, but we could be doing more. So for instance, here we have a browser plugin that I use called Wave. It throws up all sorts of accessibility points that you might want to consider. So it's great for QAing design work. Here we can see it's used on the homepage. I don't know how much you can see at this zoom level, but one of the highlighted comments here is that there's very long image alt text on this image of a phone. That could be an issue, like, is it a mistake? Why is it so long? Those things can really slow down a customer's perception of the experience they're having if they are using a screen reader, as an example. Over here, we have a similar tool, but this one is being used on our app. So this is Firebase, and it's highlighting color contrast issues where we may not be hitting the requirements that we need in order for customers to be able to comfortably navigate the website. And here you can see down here at the bottom left, I put I'm bad. This is PensionBee yellow on a white background. Unfortunately, yellow is one of the most complicated colors for accessibility and contrast. And it's our primary color is very inaccessible. So we don't, you'll very rarely see us using yellow text on a white background. There would have to be quite a specific reason for us to do that. So let's talk about a little bit about physical and motor here. And again, we're trying to understand what these things mean and what they mean for our customers. So hopefully getting a better idea of about the experience our customers might be having with our products. So here we can see, again, I've pulled up the native OS accessibility tools here that I have just sitting on my, pinned to my machine so that I can access them quickly. Google has something very similar, particularly for apps, Google Accessibility Suite or something it's called. I really recommend going and playing around with it to understand what it does, because these are the things our customers could well be using to experience our website, and therefore are the kind of things we should be checking when we deliver features to make sure that they are working correctly and the experience is a good one for as many of our customers as we can possibly cater for. So on physical and motor, we're talking about repetitive stress. That's a big one. Many of us have probably had that, right? I get it sometimes in my wrist. It becomes very difficult at times to use the mouse, for instance. That's quite a common one for anyone working for long periods of time at a computer. The opposite one being keyboard. Actually, it's the other hand that causes you problems, and people will quite often, do as much with their mouse in that instance as they can, or there's some combination of the two. And here you can see that I've engaged accessibility keyboard, which turns on a keyboard so that I can use my mouse to press the keys, therefore not using my left hand at all. So if I have an issue whereby I just want to use my mouse or different type of entry device like the ball wheel. You know, some people find different types of entry devices, but effectively point and click devices much easier to use. So that's allowing that to happen. And you can also see here above here, we've got something called mouse keys. So that is if I just want to use my keyboard, but I can use my navigation arrows in the bottom left of the keyboard that you can see on the screen there. I can use those to navigate the mouse around the screen. So just, you know, like a computer game almost, I can move the mouse and I can enter a form field and I can start typing without using the mouse itself. Lots of people do this. It's really quite a common thing. A few other options here I'll talk about. So sticky keys, that, for instance, you know, if you want to press Shift and M for a capital, that's not the best example. Like if you want to use Command or Control in conjunction with a letter or a number for a certain action, that can be quite difficult for people with certain issues, ranging from repetitive stress through to weakness, limitation of muscle control, tremors and involuntary movements, and we'll talk about those a bit more. They make it quite difficult to be precise with a key input, keystrokes, right through to something more severe, like obviously missing limbs, where you physically, there is no way you can use the keyboard or the mouse. And again, like just general things, pain that obstructs movement. A lot of us can have this at any age through an injury we might sustain, and it might be temporary, it might be more long-term. If it's more long-term, you might need to start exploring some of these accessibility tools that are available to you in order to start navigating and using the web or apps in a more comfortable fashion. So yeah, sticky keys, I don't have to hold a key and press another key. I can just use one finger to do everything effectively. That's what that's used for. And slow keys, it's just about slowing down the input, so you can make mistakes a bit easier. And that, you know, and that's okay. It helps a lot if you have sort of involuntary movements. And head pointer, which is a really interesting one that's sort of made the news because they put it into iPad, and iPads are great for accessibility, and lots of people use them if they have particular accessibility needs. I'm going to try a live demo. I don't know if you can see this, hopefully you can. I'm going over to my accessibility shortcuts that I've got up here, and I'm going to go down to head pointer, and I'm going to engage head pointer. So what head pointer does is it switches on, it uses my camera. Here are my hands, not on the mouse. I'm going to move this around with my head. It's watching the way that I'm looking, and I'm going to try and hit the target. Oh, hang on. Down we go. This is a 10 pixel target. It's tiny. Whoa, yeah. There I am. So I've done that with the movement of my head. Now that is super cool, because what that enables me to do is free up my hands. Hang on, let me just switch head pointer off. There we go. So what I've done there is I've navigated my mouse using the movement of my head. So where I'm looking, if my mobility is severely hindered, where I'm looking, with just slight head movements, can direct the mouse. Now, commonly what you will then have is you have a large button that, you know, the size of perhaps a mouse, but the entire button will be, you know, a big thing you just can click like that. So you don't need very precise hand movement. You know, it's very easy to hit the mouse button. So if that was a link or a button that I was looking to press, I've been able to do that with very, very limited movement in my upper body. And that's really important. And it's one of the reasons that we are very careful about the amount of space we put into interfaces. We make sure our buttons are always, I think the standard smallest size for a button should be sort of 45 pixels. All of our buttons are 50 pixels or bigger. And it's just to help with this mobility issue and be able to quickly and easily use the products. Speech and hearing. So again, these things can be very often happen together in some degree. Like if your hearing is bad, you can have issues with your speech, for example. Now, operating a website or an app can be quite challenging, and obviously, if you've got hearing issues, reading is the first thing you want to do. But if you, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, you may have vision issues that mean that you'd actually rather have the experience sort of read to you, spoken to you, in the same way that you might want to have audiobooks rather than books. You just find that more comfortable, and it's really important that our website acts in the same way. So there's a little tool here that I always use to check our web pages are reading in a succinct sort of fashion, a logical fashion. So you can just engage this and it will read the page for you. And I actually use this myself. I use the one, you can see one over here on the left, that's just from iOS. Google have a similar thing. I've got it set up on my phone. I just swipe down with 2 fingers from the top of the screen and it opens up the reader, and it will just read a news article, perhaps on the BBC or whatever, and you can just have it sitting there on your desk reading this news article out loud, that sort of thing, or a long form blog article, whatever it is. I use it quite a lot, and it's extremely frustrating if they're not done well and they skip areas of content. So that's the kind of thing we're checking for. Another one is being able to tab through the content. That just, it gives a great guide to how well this page will perform accessibility wise. And of course, if you're not able to use a mouse, it's also very helps you a lot to be able to navigate the page. Speech is another very important one. So speech and hearing, there are lots of tools out there. Nuance Dragon is one of the more famous ones that people use. That tool is actually developed for dictation. Lawyers, people like that have to, that have to dictate a lot. They can use this software and it will catch them. But it's also being used by people with disabilities. So, for instance, I can navigate onto our sign up page and I can speak the input that I need to enter the form. Now that's really powerful, but for people that require that, and it's relatively simple to ensure that we are enabling that to happen, but we can actively do things that really mess that up and stop them being able to progress through our forms, through our website, through our app. So it's something that needs to be checked. It's something that needs to be tested. It needs to be part of a QA process, just to ensure that this is the kind of thing that we've considered, and people don't get to a point where they cannot move forward. So yeah, so those are some of the broad topics, and I just want to talk a little bit about actually how we're designing for those things. Where do we start when it's such a sliding scale of accessibility and disability is such a it ranges from people like myself that don't consider myself to have any sort of impairment through to people that have quite specific ones. How on earth do we design for such a broad range of people? Well, luckily we have the Web Content Accessibility Guideline. And that comes in 2 distinct flavors that we're interested in for our purposes, AA and AAA. So the latest, I think 2.1 is the latest standard, and it's just a huge wealth of information about how to design accessible web-based products and apps. It's really, really valuable. Whether you decide to actively go to meet the standards and get the tick is entirely sort of up to you. I always use AA as my guideline. That was the majority of the larger government and higher education sites and charities were very much all about AA. I've done one AAA website project in the past. I think I'm the only designer still that I know that has actually done that. It's extremely difficult. It takes a hell of a lot of work, and it's questionable just how effective it really is. In a way, it kind of causes its own problems as well. And I would always steer people away from trying to go for AAA unless you have a very, very specific reason. AA is usually more than enough, particularly these days where we have so many, like I've been talking about, so many great OS-based abilities to tailor on a more specific level the experience that we're having. Apple's Human Interface Guidelines and Google Material Design's accessibility guidelines, absolutely should be read from cover to cover if you are in any way involved in designing products for people. There are a wealth of information there. And I've just pulled up another tool that I use all the time, Contrast Checker. It's just a plugin in Figma, and we can see here I've highlighted the Get Started button, and we can see that we've passed on our AA compliance standard, and we've failed on AAA. So that's what that's saying, is that shape, that color depth of black versus that vibrance of yellow does not have a sufficient contrast ratio. Normal text size, so normal text size, we're going sort of 16 to 18 point, large text size 18 upwards. So we're failing on AAA compliance there, even with something as quite contrasty as black on yellow. So let's just quickly touch on some other accessibility basics that we should be using in product design, and this is very top level. All of this talk is very top level because it's such a deep area, and it's very sort of design and content led as opposed to development led. But things like using headings correctly, again for screen reading purposes, as well as other purposes like SEO, it's just good housekeeping. Alt text for images, another obvious one. So if you can't see an image on a page, if something is reading you the page because you have a disability, accessibility issue, because you're lazy and you don't want to read the news article, whatever it is, you know, if there's an important image on that page and we don't have an alt text for it, we don't know it's there when it's being read to us. Giving links to descriptive names is very similar. So there's lots of information and guidance around what is a good link or button name. I think actually we'll touch on it briefly in this talk. And I've already mentioned design for forms for accessibility. Forms are extremely important. Forms are how we get things done. They're how we onboard customers. You know, it's absolutely crucial that they work however people want to interact with them. Keyword accessible content and navigation. We talked about dynamic content, making dynamic content accessible. So, you know, if it's video, it needs to have a transcript, whatever it is. Correct tab order I touched on, and ARIA is a way to mark up content that isn't really accessible. Just so it's a way in the code that we can get around that and describe things in a different fashion. So, you know, loads of things that we can be doing. The reason I'm racing through that is because I actually want to talk about neurodiversity as well, and this is a much less documented or well understood area about when we're designing products. It's really not one that sort of, you know, all the earnest has been on accessibility and those kinds of impairments, but there are real things we can do to help with neurodiversity, and I really think it's something we should start thinking about, whether it's the design of the products, whether it's the language we use when we're on the phone, the email correspondence, you know, across the entire business. It's something we can really be thinking about, and obviously we are, and I want to pull this into the product discussion as well. So just to recap, so we're talking about the variation in the human brain regarding sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other mental factors. And, you know, you read those things and they immediately jump out to me as things that are important in our line of work. And it's quite interesting to see how the term neurodiversity is ramping up since sort of 2004. It's really become quite prevalent. And a lot of that is through people recognizing certain things in themselves and actually understanding their own neurodiversity better, which leads them to be able to take steps to help with that. And I just want to talk about myself on that degree, because what I'm really trying to do here throughout this talk is hit home about all these things are absolute scale that we're on, and all of us are probably on a scale at some point. You know, I'm carefully not using spectrum. That's a very different thing. I'm talking about just the level and the type of diversity that we all have intrinsic in our own minds and bodies. So yeah, an interesting one for me, it was an exercise for this talk really, because I'm aware that I have certain characteristics that I've heard described in other ways, and I thought I'd go and look into it. What I found first of all was these are 4 bullet points that I pulled from the NHS site that were things that I could relate to, that are quite common for people with dyslexia. So confusing the order of words. So I really struggle when I'm reading things like spreadsheets, because there's no clear order. For instance, look at this page. I've laid this out quite nicely to make it easy to read for people. There's space, there's hierarchy there. Spreadsheets for me is so much information coming at once that I have to work quite hard to absorb it. I have to focus. It's not a problem, but I can't be distracted when I'm looking at those sorts of things and trying to understand them. Disturbances when reading. So I can't read if there's music on, people talking, a mouse whispering 2 streets away, like anything. I have to have complete sort of stillness. I put the big headphones on, whatever's needed. Otherwise, I read perfectly well, but I don't absorb the information. And quite often I'll realize I've read a whole page, but I've not taken anything in. It's a strange one, but I think it's quite a common thing with dyslexia. And there are lots of associated problems with people with dyslexia. And I really like this because it was NHS saying, yeah, we don't know. These aren't necessarily real things. There's a lot of complexity here, and things cross over all over the place. Dyscalculia is, a similar thing specifically around numbers, and I can sort of associate with that again. I don't struggle, but I need to be focused in order. Otherwise, I do find it difficult. So 700 million people worldwide live with dyslexia. Many of them are successful. It doesn't hinder people's life in many ways. And I don't associate as being dyslexic. I've never been tested for that sort of thing. It's if I do have it, then it's just not severe enough to have ever been an issue for me. But I can relate to it, and there are things that would make things easier for me that would certainly make things easier if you were dyslexic in a more severe case. So another really interesting one is OCD. Now, disclaimer, like at the bottom, I put this here. I don't believe I have OCD. A lot of people misuse that when they're saying about some sort of compulsion they have, which I think everyone just kind of has. But it's really interesting to think about this and talk about it. I've never really talked about this with anyone. So I'm sort of, we're all friends here. So I'm opening up and talking about some strange, things that I don't fully understand myself. But what I found interesting, this is the entire checklist from the NHS. It was easier to omit a couple than it was to put in the ones that I had in this instance. And I thought that was really interesting. So cleaning and hand washing, like, for me, when I was young, like I had a very strange thing with teeth cleaning. It was almost obsessive. Like at times I couldn't really stop. It's hard to explain this. It had to be an even number of times. Like I really want to hear from you guys as well if you've had anything similar to these than I do. I will ask that in a bit. So checking stuff is locked and off and all of that. Counting and ordering and arranging was a big one for me. It kind of still is, but it does, none of these things hindered my life ever really, and particularly not as an adult. They've all eased as I got older. If you look at the shapes that I put in, the Tetris-y looking shapes on the top right, these shapes have always been really, for some unknown reason, important in my life. They're the same shape effectively in my mind. There's a sort of, there's a slight, I don't know what the word is, imprint on the third one, which is just really important to me. If I'm walking, the third step has to be a little bit harder or something. Like, again, it affected me quite a lot when I was younger. I thought I was kind of going crazy, but it's become less over time. And actually, since I've got into design, I've really drawn comparisons to many of these things that I've experienced as being kind of related to the golden ratio, which, if you don't know what that is, it's very useful in design. It occurs all through nature, from shells and flower heads through to weather systems, and it was so interesting to me that I had this feeling inside me that kind of relates to that calculation. And it's a little bit like, I don't know if you've seen this film, God, what's it called? You know the one I mean, the famous sci-fi, not 2001 Space Odyssey, the other one, Close Encounters. I'm sure someone just wrote that in the messages, but I'm not seeing the messages. I kind of felt like that. It's just an inbuilt compulsion. Anyway, we don't need to spend time on this. I don't have any. I've never had anything to do with asking for reassurance, really. But repeating words in my head, I definitely can relate to that. And thinking, neutralizing thoughts, I can kind of relate to these things. So again, there are things we can do to help people with these neurodiversities in our day-to-day jobs. It's really important to to think about them on a personal level. That's how we begin helping people, and just trying to relate to people and understand the different types of things we can deal with. So things I don't have, but others do. ADHD, very common. So a group of behavioural symptoms that include inattentiveness, hyperactivity, impulsiveness. And there's a tool here. Lucy showed me this tool. It's a fantastic tool made by PensionBee. And it's a third-party tool that you can embed in your website, like you would like a chat agent or something. And it just caters for a lot of different accessibility needs. I thought this one was very interesting, the one for ADHD. So this light box kind of effect that we've got, where my cursor is lit up and the rest of the page is made darker, and it draws your eye. It helps you focus on what you're looking at. Interestingly, I always, I don't know if anyone else does this, I click and drag on long articles to highlight them so that I know where I'm reading. I've always done it. I've never really thought about it, but apparently people with ADHD, require a similar thing to help them, focus on the part of the page they're looking at. Another one's dyspraxia. I don't want to go into too much detail on these different things. There are lots of them. I just pulled out a few that are quite relevant for product design. And then there are disabilities. We're talking about about cognitive disabilities here, and it's a very difficult, strange topic, and I don't like that term at all. I prefer sort of variations in mental function. Some of these are just more specific or more unique or more severe in terms of the way they hinder your daily life. But yeah, they're extremely important, and they are people's entire perception of the world, and we need to help them as far as we can within our remit as developers, as copywriters, as designers, as people on the phone talking to people. We need to be aware of this stuff, as we know. I really like this description here. The social model of disability actually argues that the barriers and structures within society make individuals disabled rather than the physical or mental condition itself, meaning that if the environment they're in is set up for them, for people with whatever needs they have to suit their needs, their problems to a large extent go away. And it's actually because they are trying to fit into a world that isn't necessarily designed for them, that's where their disability becomes a problem. So we've got things like autism, and we've got things like cerebral palsy, so fidgety, jerky. I don't know why they've called this clumsy movements. I hate that. I think I copied this from the NHS, and it's a good example of how much further we've got to come. People that are struggling in their movement to do simple things like hit a mouse button on a link on a web page. Yeah, and obviously I think the famous quote from Greta, being different is a superpower. It can be a superpower. And I wonder, it makes me think back to when I was at school, and I had a friend with very severe dyslexia, and he had all sorts of problems. He was teased, he had to, special classes and things, he was very severe. I was with him in art class, and he was fantastic. We were both really good in art class. I was more technical, he was more expressive, and he just made these incredible things. And some of the people that were just acing maths and English were just so bad, almost like they almost had a disability in art class. No one mentioned it, no one picked them up on it, no one tried to help them even or improve their experience. It's just the way it's just what we value in the world, really. I think that makes disabilities or neurodiversities kind of what they are. Anyway, on to what we can do to help, and I'm just conscious of time here. Got to rattle through this a bit. There's not too much more to go. So plain language, like this, this affects all of us, whether we're speaking to customers, whether we're writing to customers, whether we're writing microcopy in products. No jargon. No one wants jargon. It doesn't matter if you've got a neurodiversity of some description or you don't feel like you do at all. No one wants jargon. Writing in simple terms makes content more accessible. Now, that is the interesting thing here. It's not just about making it easy for people, which we talk about a lot. It's actually about making that content accessible as well. Things we can do to help here. So stick to active voice. This is, this really helps people with ADHD. It also just helps people generally to understand a point as quickly as possible when they're scanning web pages and not necessarily reading everything verbatim. The examples of this, things like Michael is baking a brownie as opposed to the brownies being baked by Michael, or you know, whatever version of that. That's the common one you hear. So just being more direct with your language. Avoid metaphors. You know, we've heard about this already in talk on autism. Like it's really bad for people to use metaphors unnecessarily. Don't call it a day. Just say the thing's done. You know, just be more explicit and precise. So the format you're writing in, so breaking it up makes it so much easier for many people, including myself. Using bullet points helps as well, like I've done for you guys here, to make this page a little bit easier to read. And descriptive button links. You know, using click here is terrible. Like if you've ever listened to a web page, like it just doesn't read properly. If your experience is listening to things rather than looking at them and reading them. There are loads of examples of that. And over here on the right is something called Hemingway app. So if you are, you know, if you are unsure about these things, this is a great tool. You can, there's a Chrome Google Chrome plugin for it. So you can use it to read the thing you've written, and it will pull out things like active voice and make suggestions for you. So yeah, if you are ever interested in trying that, I highly recommend it. It's a bit of an eye opener. You can see I've highlighted one here that is active voice. Obviously there are the usual ones like grammar and all sorts of things. Another one is typography. So on screen serif fonts are easier to read, like the one that this whole page is written in. As a little joke, I've actually got Comic Sans up in the top right here, which actually is perfectly friendly for dyslexic people. It's very clear and easy to read. Not such a joke font at all. A few other things we can do. So sensory stimulation is a big one. And it's interesting because it's a balance, because you've got people with autism, they have a sort of heightened experience, and whereas people with ADHD, they kind of require more stimulation in order to keep their attention. So we've got a contradiction here, right? So things are at odds. So it's about being careful. Be careful with animation, because too much of it can induce anxiety, even through to sort of epilepsy. You know, if it's really busy, lots going on, you know, flashing colors and things. So as much as we might want to put something that really grabs your attention up on Instagram, you know, cut through the noise or whatever you want to call it, you need to be mindful there's another side to that, and it actually can be quite upsetting to a lot of people to have that kind of appear in their face. And again, there are great tools now, like even on an OS level, and like on the tool that Lucy told me about, that you can disable those things, you know, so you aren't surprised by them. Yeah, fantastic improvements going on there. Avoiding autoplay, like it can be quite upsetting again for certain people, autoplay of videos and things. Subtitles and captions, of course, we always want to include those for many different reasons, but visual cues as well. Consistency and hierarchy, just making it easier for people, dyslexic people, or people with any sort of neurodivergent sort of issues, but also just everyone, for it to be a more comfortable experience of the internet. If people want to hear more about this, because I don't have too much time, I could spend forever on it, there's a link at the bottom here. Just go to w3.org and you'll find out much more about how we can make accessible products for people with cognitive and learning disabilities. So what else can we do? So this is really a big one for me. So we can fix known issues. I can look at our website, for instance, and I can probably find an accessibility issue on every single page. I would almost put money on that. And there are obviously also, you know, but I'm aware of these things, so that's easy. I know what we should fix. It's just a matter of how do we go about fixing it now and not introducing more in the future. So that's around improving our QA process. So making sure there are checklists in place that we can make sure, yes, we have passed this test for a screen reader. We have passed this test for a color contrast checker. Whatever it might be, we have a process in place to ensure that we've done those things. And again, it's to some degree, it's up to us to decide what those things are. Is it our own baseline tick sheet? Is it AA? Is it AAA? Whatever it needs to be, but there should be something in place, and it should be in place for communications as well as, you know, interfaces. Testing the tools available, using those tools that I've shown you today. Like I tend to, if I'm queuing a web page, I'll have the thing playing that text to me, and quite often it will skip something and I'll be like, well, there's a problem. Tab through the page. If it skips an important thing, that's to all intents and purposes invisible to certain people using your product with a different experience. And test with real people. So that's obviously, we have people that have special needs of some description. We have people calling us saying please, or writing to us, I should say, like saying please don't call me because, you know, I've got hearing disability, you know, and we should be catering for those people. We should be listening to those people and trying to understand their experience of our products. I just came off of a call with Priel and the deafblind.org charity this morning, and they were talking about working with us to improve our products for those people and recommending us as to their customer base. So their customers find it extremely difficult to find and combine pensions because they have, you know, some degree of deaf or blindness, and actually combining their pensions into one place makes their life so much easier. Obviously, that's what we're trying to do, except we've come at it from a different angle. So we're completely in sync with what we're trying to achieve, but for different reasons. And they are really happy that they're going to run a talk for us so that we can understand better the needs of those people. And they're also going to help us get in contact with these people, some of which are actually already our customers, and that's how they found out about us. And we can use those people as testing. They do this already themselves in-house for different companies, different products. We can use them to actually actively test our products and point out accessibility issues. So that's a fantastic resource that we're getting to grips with now. We can add accessibility guidelines to honeypot.pensionbee.com. You know, that's where we store a lot of our information around tone and voice, brand and comms kind of guidance. Accessibility should be, you know, baked into that. Absolutely. So we know what our guidelines are and we know how to talk about things. And also there's a lot of crossover, like, you know, no jargon. There's already crossover with how we do things. But I think it's important to add those guidelines in, and you know, it makes it a thing when you talk about it and it has a section and we have a policy. And that's important. You know, we're a listed company. We need to report to people. We need to be able to say, yes, we're on this stuff. We are providing this service for our customers. So we can conduct an accessibility audit, internal or external. I would start internally because I can probably do it myself and catch many things. So I would also, other people within the company, Lucy, for instance, who's very passionate about this sort of thing, we could actually do a little tech spike into this, you know, make it a little project and try and, you know, getting control of understanding the remit of what we're dealing with here and what the quick wins are. And once we've dealt with all of that, we can also go and do an accessibility audit with an external third party, which will be impartial and will come at it from their completely different angle. And that would be a fantastic thing to do, but you don't want them to go and capture a bunch of things that you already know. So it's best to do them in sequence. And there are new product features, such as, you know, it could be a communication center or some way of customers letting us know, don't contact me on the phone, you know, I'm deaf, I want everything via an email or in the product. And keep sharing and talking about how we can improve this stuff, because it's such a huge topic and there's so much we can do better than we are. All right, so I'm wrapping up now. We're getting near, it's been almost an hour. I just want to talk about some of the other cool stuff that's out there that I think it's really important for us to think about, you know, these product technology innovations, because we're a technology company and there's so much being done in technology space. It's interesting to think about technology as being a barrier to people with accessibility problems. You would naturally think, oh, it's going to be hard for that person to do that task because they can't see or because they can't hear. That is completely false. It's the complete opposite. The reality is technology has improved people's lives with disabilities so dramatically, you know, even just in the past 5 years, is unimaginable. Their lives being absolutely turned upside down, and their ability to navigate in the world and do basic jobs and tasks is just increasing exponentially. So a couple of these that are interesting to me was Lookout by Google. So basically it's just like VR really, where you can use your phone to read anything around you. So if you're visually impaired, You can just look at, you know, we've got an example here. We're looking at a birthday card, and it can just read happy birthday out to you. So you know, your phone is communicating words that are in the printed world around you. Could be signs on bottles, could be signs on the road. You know, fantastic innovation there. A similar thing from Microsoft, seeing AI narrating the world around you. So visually impaired people can sort of understand, you know, they can't see necessarily very well, but their phone can see increasingly better in every new generation of phone. And that phone can understand its surroundings, and it can relay them to the person via their headphones. Yeah, fantastic way to now navigate the world, whether online or offline. So Roger Voice, so we're talking about real-time transcription of phone conversations. So, you know, I have a hearing issue, but I want to take a phone call. So someone calls me, I use Roger Voice, and it real-time transcribes the words that are coming in, and I can speak back or type back in, you know, and I'm having that phone conversation near to a real phone conversation. Obviously, we get, you know, when you think about people saying to us, guys, can you stop phoning me? I'm deaf. You know, that's happening to these people everywhere. So something like Roger Voice is a great way to sort of use technology to solve that problem until the companies are more aware and solving that problem as well. Speechify, so yeah, intelligent text-to-speech audio reader. So this is like turning real books into audio books. Again, great, right? So you have your book on the table, your newspaper, you're sitting there with your iPad over it, and it just reads the page for you. Amazing innovations. Like, it's so exciting to be part of the world of technology right now, if you're in any way interested in this sort of field of it.